Hi everyone, I hope everybody's doing well, and today I'm going to talk about 5 annoying settings I think you should change now. Now, the good thing about these settings is that they're very binary. They're either on or off, yes or no, etc. So just because I find it annoying, maybe you don't, and you can just leave it the way it is, right? And by the way it is, meaning these are the default settings in the camera. So let's start going through them. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and do a full reset on the camera. That way we're back to the camera's default settings, and then we're going to make changes from there. Now I like to shoot an electronic shutter most of the time, or otherwise is known as silent shutter in our cameras, but the only problem is it also turns off that auto confirmation beep that you hear when you half press the shutter button. And I like to hear that just to know that I got confirmation of focus, particularly when I'm in single point autofocus or SAF. So I'm going to turn that autofocus confirmation beep back on. All right, so you go into shooting menu number 1, and then we're going to roll over to page 7 to drive mode, and we're going to scroll down here to silent settings. Now there's several other settings here you might want to consider, but for now I'm just going to turn the autofocus confirmation beep back on. So now when I half press the shutter button or hit the AF on button, I will get that confirmation beep. Now the next setting is also autofocus related, but it's very specific to certain lenses that have the manual focus clutch. So you're going to find this on a lot of pro lenses where you can pull this clutch back to engage it, and now the lens is in manual focus mode, and then to go back to autofocus, you push it forward. Now, I can't tell you how many times people have come to me and said, my camera's not autofocusing. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why. I have everything set for single AF or continuous AF, and, I have pressed the shutter button and it just won't autofocus sometimes. And I'm like, well, if you have one of these lenses, some of them have, that manual focus clutch on it. You need to check that. And they're like, oh, I didn't know it had one of those. And they check and they go, sure enough, that's what it was. And I can tell you it's happened to me where I've gone halfway through a photo walk, and I didn't realize that, I had the manual focus clutch engaged and wasn't getting autofocus. And that's another reason I like to have the autofocus confirmation beep on. But what we're going to do now is just disengage or disable that autofocus clutch feature in the menu. So this time we need to go into the autofocus menu and then go over to page number 6 for manual focus. And then we can disable or make it inoperative. So now no matter how the manual focus clutch is engaged, your camera is going to follow whatever setting you have in the super control panel here. So if I do want manual focus, I can just set it to manual focus, but most of the time I'll be in single point autofocus. Now the next setting I want to talk about has to do with the multi-selector button, or I like to call it the joystick, because you can move this left, right, up, down, and diagonally, etc. However, it's also clickable like this. And by default, this is deactivated or turned off. So I'm going to turn this back on so it does something. All right, so the way it is now, if I do move the joystick around by default, it'll move the focus point. And then if I click it, it'll actually recenter. So it doesn't absolutely do nothing, but it only does things when you're in the autofocus target mode. When you're just in live view and I click it, like I am now, nothing is happening. So let's change that behavior. We'll go into the menu. We'll go all the way over here to the operations menu, and we're going to select this line item, multi-selector settings, and click OK. And you can see by default the center button is off. So we're going to click on this. We can change this to go directly into the AF target point mode, which is the same as moving the joystick, but now we can just click on it. So that's kind of useless to me. This is a better way to set it, so that it always goes back to the home point. And by that I mean you can set the default focus point and mode by using this setting when you click on the button. So let's select this and I'll show you what I mean. So now that I have the center button set to HP or home point, let me show you what happens. Let's say I move my focus point around, I take my picture, and then I'm back to the live view. The home point is basically the default setting that you want the autofocus target mode to go to and position. And by default, right now, it's set to all points. So if I center click on this, you can see that little green box go around, which is telling me that I'm now back to all points instead of a single point. So As you can see here, it says all, and then I have to rotate the dial to go back to say this small point or single point. And I'll click OK. And now I'm in single point, and I can move my point around, or I can click it and it'll go back to the center. But when I'm in live view mode, if I click the center button, it'll put it back into this all point autofocus, as you can see here. But we can change this default setting as well. So let's go into the menu, go into the autofocus menu, and it looks like it's on page 5. So we'll go down here to set home. It should say set HP, right? Like it does on the other menus, so there's some continuity, but it doesn't. Okay, so as you can see, it's set to all, and the target point is set to center. So let me go back. Let's change this to be single point, and then we'll just leave this in the center. But you can change that behavior too if you want it to go somewhere else, but we're going to leave it in the center. So now let's say I move my focus point around like so. Take my picture. If I center click the button now, it'll go back to the center. So no matter where I put this, take my picture. If I want to go back to the center, I click OK, or not OK, I'm sorry. I click the center button, and it'll go right back to a single point autofocus. Now the next setting we're going to talk about has to do with the file names of the images as you're taking pictures. So when you take your first picture, it's going to name that image P7190001, and then I'll name the next picture P7190002, and so on. And I'll increment that last digit by 1 for every picture that you take. And that's perfectly fine, but the problem comes when, let's say that memory card gets full, you take that out, you put another one in, you format it, and you start taking pictures again. It's going to start back at P7190001. And then when you go to load these back into your computer, you're going to have multiple file names with the, that are the same, right? And that can be confusing. So what I like to do is set the camera to not reset the file number every time you put another memory card in or format the same memory card. I like it to increment that by 1 from where it left off. So let's change that setting. All right, so let's go into the menu, and we want to go all the way over here to the wrench menu, and it's on the first page, and it's right down here. File name reset. So every time you format the memory card, it's going to reset the file name or counter back to 1. So we just changed this to auto. So now every time I format another memory card or the same memory card, it's going not reset it back to 1, but it's going to pick up where it left off in terms of the sequence numbers. Now, a lot of photo editing software that imports images from your SD card can handle duplicate file names. And what it does is it will append like a -1 or a parentheses 1 or 2 to the file name so it can distinguish between the two files separately in the file management system. So if you've seen your files or your images with these kind of suffixes or appendages like -1, -2, or parentheses 1, parentheses 2, that's wise because the photo editing software during the import recognized a duplicate file name. Now the last setting I want to talk about also has to do with the image files, and that's putting your copyright information and embed those into the metadata of the file. So when people look at your files or look at the EXIF data, they can see who took the picture and when. And let me show you what I mean. We'll go into the second page here of the wrench and go down here to copyright info. And by default, this is turned off. So we need to turn this on so that our copyright information gets saved into the file itself. And then for copyright information, the way I like to do it is I'll put the year 2022, and then I'll put my contact information, just my email address and maybe phone number, for example. So if somebody looks at my images or finds my camera or the memory card, they can contact me and give it back to me, right? And then for copyright, I just put the year and my name in there. And this stuff is entered manually, so you click OK, and then you kind of just go through the keyboard here, the virtual keyboard, and click on the letters and numbers that you want, etc. Now this last setting also deals with your image files, but this time we're talking about the file format. And by default, the setting is set to large fine JPEG. And that is not the highest quality JPEG, let alone it's not RAW. And I like to shoot in RAW, so I'm going to change it to RAW, but I think at the very least you want to change it to large superfine, which is the highest quality JPEG. So let me show you how to do that. It's in the Super Control panel. So I'm going to click the OK button to go into the Super Control panel, and we'll go right here to card slot number 1. And as you can see, the default settings large fine. So large superfine is the highest quality JPEG, and I'm going to set mine to RAW. And of course, there's many other options here, and I would just ignore them. I would either pick RAW, large superfine, or large superfine plus RAW if you want to do both. So there's 5 settings plus one more, because while I was making the video, I saw that the default setting for file format was large fine and not large superfine or RAW. So I had to include that here at the end. But hopefully you liked this video, you found this helpful. If so, hit the like button, subscribe, and if you can, maybe buy me a coffee. It makes making these videos a lot easier for me. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.